What's the most unfair thing you've ever seen? Story 1. I was in an intermediate school and we were out at the camp. Now, I was the only scout amongst the 60-odd kids, so I was given the harder tasks to keep myself entertained. On the first night, we were carrying these heavy wooden benches around, and my partner dropped his end of the bench. Due to the sudden drop, the bench slammed into my foot, almost completely crushing it. It swelled up to nearly twice the size, broke at least 3 toes, and the whole thing went purple. Because me clearly being in tremendous pain, I was told to suck it up, because I was a scout, and should be able to handle it. I was told to shove my half-broken foot into my already too small tramping boots and keep up with everyone else for the next several days. Some kid fell down a 2-meter hill, think like 50-degree angle, on the last day and got called an ambulance. This was 6 years ago, and I'm still fuming. Story 2. My mom bought my brother a Sega from a garage sale years after it was a popular gaming system. It didn't change the love my brother had for it. My brother and I routinely took care of ourselves after school as parents were working. One day, my dad came home early and was irate that my brother wasn't home. He then proceeded to make me throw his Sega in the dumpster of our complex and told me if I brought it back in, I would be hit with the belt. This was his idea of a punishment towards my brother. In my 8-year-old brain, I obviously don't want to get hit and did as I was told. The look on my brother's face when he came home and my dad told him what happened to his Sega was just heartbreaking. It still makes me sad when I think about it. I'm not sure what built up to your dad making that decision, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say your dad sounds like a real D. Hey parents, being a butthole doesn't teach your kid to be better, it teaches them that you're a butthole. Story 3. I was adopting my dog from animal control and saw this guy come in asking about a couple of cats he dropped off the day before. He had changed his mind and was going to keep them. The shelter has a policy that they don't put down animals that have been surrendered until at least 3 days. I guess it gets really overcrowded or something, I'm not sure. Point is, he had 48 hours until that could happen to his cats. Anyway, he was explaining this to the front desk lady, and she looks up records for him. She tells him both cats were already put down. Oh my God, the look on his face still hurts my heart today. It was this look of hurt, guilt, anger, and sadness, simply gut-wrenching, and he cried over those babies too. He was going on about how he had more time, and they said they wouldn't for 3 days. Absolutely was not fair to the animals or him. Story 4. When I was younger, my brother and I both wanted to play different video games on our N64. My dad had us each make paper airplanes, and whichever one flew the furthest was going to be the game we played. My plane ended up flying further, but then my brother started to cry, so my dad just took both the games and snapped them in half. All right, kids, it's time you learn a lesson. And that lesson is, I'm not very good at parenting sometimes. Story 5. Growing up, I had a friend whose family was the worst. I went over there to play dates a lot. One day, a Korean girl who I sort of befriended and helped her with her homework, she was younger than me, followed me to my friend's house. When we saw her come up to the house, the mom shooed her away. She said, "I don't want Chinese people in my house." The girl went home crying her eyes out. I felt terrible for not following and comforting her, but I was 10 years old and didn't know what to do. The worst part is that the mother who insulted the girl blamed me for the incident because she was trying to save face. The Korean family told me they didn't need me to help her with her homework anymore. I'm not sure if the girl was too shy or scared to tell the truth, but I never spoke to either of the families again. Story 6. Last year, my best friend was killed by a cop who had lost sight of a suspect he was chasing. The cop hit him going through an intersection going 90 miles per hour. My friend was the best guy you could meet, honest. Just very kind-hearted. I saw the car later. There was about 6 inches of space between the passenger door and the driver's. Story 7. When I was in grade school, we had a final group assignment to design a community center, with my teacher promising a lobster dinner for the group that had the highest mark. I had a bit of a crush on my teacher and thought, hey, lobster dinner. My group busted their butts designing the Hijinks after-school community center, calling a long list of businesses to determine membership fees, cost of construction, we got hung up on a lot looking for a price of building materials, community outreach programs, and a whole lot more. We even helped the special needs kid in our group write a jingle, and we got the highest mark. When it came time for our lobster dinner, my group stayed in the classroom during recess to enjoy the fruits of our labor. My teacher brings out our lobster, which was a loaf of bread with googly eyes and paper lobster claws stuck in the side. It was on that day I learned the true meaning of disappointment. What the F? I'm sorry, I can get that a teacher might not provide an actual lobster feast, but that's like the most insulting replacement reward I've heard about. Getting to just go outside for recess would have been a better reward. Teacher, you suck. Story 8. Me and my sister both had braces and had to wear those rubber bands that fix your jaw or whatever. I wore my bands every single night while my sister rarely wore them. When we had our dentist appointment, the dentist looked at my teeth and then gave me a disappointed, "You haven't been wearing your bands, have you?" I tried to tell her I always wore them, but she obviously didn't believe me. Then my sister got in the chair and our dentist said, "Wow, you've been wearing your bands." That was maybe 10 years ago. My teeth are still worse than my sister's. Story 9. I hung out with a bunch of poor misfits in high school. We all wore hand-me-down clothes and qualified for free lunch at school and crap. Lots of single-parent families and government assistance. This one girl in my group complained more than anyone else about how her family was poor. She often didn't have lunch, and so the other kids would all chip in and either give her money or share our own lunches. 2 of the kids we hung out with were twin brothers. Their mom was raising them plus their older brother all on her own because their dad was incarcerated. He finally got out when we were teens and pretty much immediately ran off and refused to pay support, too. Because of the circumstances, the boys started working to support their family really young. First doing odd jobs for folks and then getting real jobs as soon as they could. The 2 of them felt so sorry for this girl they decided to surprise her for Christmas one year. They saved up what they could for months and bought her a brand new game system she'd been complaining about wanting. Meanwhile, she gave a few of us used games and books, obviously previously played/read by her, wrapped in tinfoil instead of gift wrap. And we all shrugged that off because, of course, she was poor. A couple weeks after that Christmas, the girl's parents decided to let her throw her first small party for her friends at their house. Her dad picks us all up in their brand new minivan, then drove us to their brand new house. After we arrived, we got introduced to her new puppy and then given the home tour, which included 5 bedrooms and a pool. Also notable was the girl's bedroom, where her new game system sat alongside 2 other recent systems. I found out later that her dad was an attorney and her mom was a medical assistant. Her parents' combined income was 3 to 4 times what my family made in a year, much less our friends who had worked their butts off to buy her that game system. Her idea of being poor was based on her parents not buying her everything she wanted immediately. The reason she never had lunch money? She saved what her folks gave her to buy herself things instead while mooching off kids who were on free lunch. The reason she always gave us used stuff as gifts? Because she would have her parents buy a bunch of stuff for her friends at holidays, then keep it for herself while giving us stuff she no longer wanted instead. I'll never forget the look on my friends' faces as they slowly realized that the person they'd worked to support out of sympathy was actually just a spoiled brat. Good Lord, you knew from the beginning when the story mentioned her that something was up, but that build-up and delivery was still friggin' just wow. I just wish I knew how you all confronted her after that. Story 10. In college, I moved in with my girlfriend, who is now my wife. My parents were so upset I was cut off from all insurance and lectured on how horrible a thing I had done. When my sister moved in with her boyfriend, my dad went and painted their bedroom so it would look nice. My little brother broke most of my electronic devices and my parents blamed me and made me pay for everything that my little brother broke. He broke things like my DS, PSP, a TV, a few 360 and PS4 controllers, my PS4, Wii, and GameCube, and a spattering of other bits and bobs. I worked for most of this stuff as I've had odd jobs since I was 8, which allowed me to buy most of these things. One specific thing he broke that I remember being really unfair is my old laptop. I went on a camping trip with friends. Laptop was working, casing was a little cracked as it was like 2 years old, and I've taken it to college a lot. I came home and the laptop was dead, so I put it on charge. Wouldn't accept a charge whatsoever. I told my parents that it wasn't working and said I was going to try and fix it. I'm not too tech savvy, but I thought I could fix it. I took it to the garage where all the work stuff is and took it apart. My little brother thought it'd be a good idea to come down and play football in the garage. The ball hit a heavy lamp, slammed into the laptop, it bounced off the laptop and tested me in the head, which gave me a black eye and a heavy nosebleed. Blood all over the cracked/bent motherboards on my laptop was fricked. I told my parents what had happened, showed them the damage, and they blamed me and told me I had to pay them back for the laptop and buy myself a new one, even though I later found out that it was my little brother that caused the laptop to not be able to charge. He'd messed with the charging port. Then, with the football, he cracked and warped the motherboard because of the lamp. I wasn't able to get him into trouble for it. Overall, my little brother has cost me and my parents about PS 2001 damages, and he's gotten away with every single thing he's broken. That whole bit with the laptop sounds like something off of a weird slapstick TV show or something. Also, I cannot fathom your parents' logic in that situation. Who knew this video about unfair stuff would get me so mad about things being unfair? Story 11. I took care of a woman who had cancer and was in her end days. She was young, late 30s, and had 3 sons, ages 9, 11, and 18. Apparently, she had only just been diagnosed earlier that year. Earlier in the year, when her husband got the news that she had cancer, he was on his way home to comfort her and was killed in a car accident. So these boys lost their parents in the span of about 10 months. This woman not only found out she was dying, but then was loaded with the grief of his death and the uncertainty of her children's future. All of us nurses had to rotate care on her as no one could leave that room and not be in tears. We didn't want to add to the boys' grief. Life is fricked sometimes. Story 12. One of my friends got cancer as a teenager, fought it for years and beat it, and had good health for 20 years. In her late 30s, she got pregnant with her then husband. She ended up getting divorced during the pregnancy because he was an alcoholic and couldn't or wouldn't stop drinking in spite of being diabetic and losing one of his feet due to the combination. So she has the baby and she tries to breastfeed, but she can't produce any milk, so she goes to the doctor and it turns out she can't produce milk because she has breast cancer. She puts up an incredible fight, has a double mastectomy and chemo and radiation while being a single mother to a newborn, and she beats cancer a second time. 5 years go by, and things are going well until she starts feeling really tired all the time. Goes to the doctor, she has cancer again, but this time it's in her spine and it's terminal. She's been dating this guy who luckily turned out to be an incredible dude because he sticks with her through the whole thing and she fights it hard. Because her daughter is only 5 years old and she doesn't want her to grow up without her mother. She died earlier this summer. The dad is pretty much out of the picture. The guy who stuck with her through terminal cancer and the daughter are extremely close, but he has no legal rights. I really don't know what's happening with the kid, but she basically just lost the 2 people she thought of as parents. Probably the best case scenario is that she'll end up with her grandmother and still be able to see the guy sometimes. My friend was one of the most wonderful and baddest people I've ever known, and she went through hell 3 times and then died. The whole thing is just so tragic and unfair. There's nothing quite so unfair in this world as a life cut short. You would think it wouldn't feel so unfair because that is true for every single person, but be that as it may, it is still just tragic and unfair. Story 13. Coworker was written up by HR for being part of an email thread. Said thread was not inappropriate but made light of some bad behavior within the company, even though the coworker in question had never responded to the email. Story 14. I was in my buddy's car when he got pulled over for speeding. When I saw the cop as we drove past him, I instinctively tugged on my seatbelt to affirm it was on. When the cop wrote my buddy his ticket, he gave me one for not wearing my seatbelt. He apparently thought my tug on the belt was me putting it on. I explained everything, and he didn't believe me. I went to court over it, and the judge compromised by cutting the fine in half. I didn't do anything wrong and still had to pay a fine. Story 15. My friend and I wrote the exact same thing on a test. He got it marked right, and mine was marked wrong. Story 16. When we were about 12 and 10, my brother was very irresponsible with his things. He had his new bike stolen after leaving it on the front lawn of the house, unlocked because he was too lazy to bring it into the garage. Fine, his fault, his loss. So he starts borrowing my bike all of the time and does the exact same thing and gets it stolen within a matter of weeks. My parents refused to get me a new bike or give him any crap over losing mine, and I never got another bike until I was an adult who could afford to buy themselves one. Also, since his birthday was in the summer, he got a brand new bike, brand new everything, and mine is 2 weeks after Christmas. You can guess I got the used bike. Used everything. As the oldest of 4 children, I'm quite familiar with parents becoming more and more lenient with younger siblings and coddling them more. It's just a fact of life sometimes. Parents get more tired, expect more of you, all that. It isn't fair, but I can hardly blame parents sometimes. Story 17. I'm a foster parent. All of our foster kids have had terrible stories. Some have had happy endings, new families, old families that got their act together. Some have not had happy endings. Trying to help these kids is the hardest thing I've ever done. Unfair to me is knowing that last night 6 kids ages 2 through 12 slept on cots in a CPS office near here because their parents couldn't keep clean, and there's not enough foster families to handle the load. Tonight they'll probably be in an institution until a placement opens up because their parents are frick-ups. I can't think of anything more unfair than a toddler sleeping on a cot in a strange office building because their parents shouldn't be parents. Story 18. A girl who lived down the street from me growing up died in a car crash. She was really young, hadn't even finished college yet. 2 or 3 years later, her younger sister, who my sister and I used to play with together, died the exact same way. The only one left is the middle child, their brother. I can tell it has absolutely crushed their family, and I just remember going to the funeral and thinking, why? Why did they have to live through this not once but twice? That much heartache has to be unbelievable, and it's incredibly unfair. The brother was always a little prick growing up, but man, I wish I could pull him aside now and tell him just how sorry I am that he has to live without his sisters, and that if he needs anything, not to hesitate to ask. But I really never knew him well, so he'd probably think that was weird. But I think of him and his family often. Update. I know a bunch of people were saying I should reach out. Looked him up on social media. Looks like he's actually doing really, really well. Looks very happy, has a girl now, and a good support system. So I feel a bit better. Mostly just wanted to know he was okay. Story 19. How a guy died because he couldn't raise enough money for insulin on GoFundMe, but people were donating to make Kylie Jenner a billionaire. Oh man, do I rant about Kylie Jenner and that whole family, or about how there are no good billionaires, or about the healthcare system that would lead to that man dying? So many things to be angry about, all from just one sentence. Story 20. I was once at a fundraiser where the winning prize was tickets to go see Pearl Jam in concert. At the end of the night, they called my name as the winner. Woo! Except when I get to the front of the room to collect my tickets, I get looks of confusion and the runaround until the event was over. Turns out some scumbag son of a bee told the organizers he was me and they gave him the friggin' tickets. By the time they verified that I was me, he was long gone and I was out of luck. Best they could do was an apology and a $50 gift card to TGI Fridays. Story 21. When I was a teen in Spanish class, I did a project with some other students and we made an instructional video all in Spanish. The other students already spoke Spanish fluently and I didn't. We were all in the video, but I ended up planning, writing, editing, and filming the thing as well. I got a B in the project because my accent and pronunciation wasn't as good as the others who got A's. The teacher knew I did most of the work. Story 22. My parents are divorcing. Unbeknownst to my mom, my dad racked up over $400,000 in debt, plus he took out $100,000 in equity on the house. Now my mom must accept half of that debt as well as give up half of her 401k. She worked hard for 30 years and will be left penniless. It is injustice to the highest degree. Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. Story 23. When I was about 10 years old, I was walking a few blocks to the corner store carrying a liter Coke bottle so that I could cash in the bottle and get some food. There was an apartment complex right next to the store, and as I was walking past, I heard a child screaming for help in Afrikaans. My immediate thought was domestic violence between mom and dad type of thing, and I was scared to go see what I could help with when this 5 to 6 year old boy crying profusely and screaming for help rushed out of the complex. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I had to go see if I could help this kid. So I go up to him and he grabs my hand and starts pulling me into the complex, obviously dragging me to his apartment. I follow him and we go inside his apartment and I'm scared as hell. I don't know what to expect, but I expect it's bad. He drags me into the bathroom and I see his mom leaning over the bath in a housecoat. I think she was washing clothes in the bath and she must have slipped and was lying with the upper torso into the bath so that her face was submerged and she wasn't moving. I tried to grab her and pull her out of the water, but she was really heavy. I eventually got her head out of the water, but I was young and didn't know any first aid. So I ran downstairs to the corner store and asked the man to use the phone to call an ambulance. There was no 911. He initially said no, but after explaining that I think a woman had drowned, he relented, and I used the phone to look up emergency number and call an ambulance. I did not go back. I was too scared. I do not know what happened to the kid or his mom. It is the most unfair event I have ever witnessed. I'm shaking just thinking about it. I don't know how you grow up having gone through that, either you or that kid. That is absolutely terrible to hear about, but at least you did something to help. Story 24. My freshman year of college, I got to be extremely close with a girl who was a senior. We did everything together. At the time, I was heavily religious, and so was she. We went to the same cultish church and spent almost all of our waking hours together. She was my best friend and my duet partner when we led worship at our university's Christian group. She was stubborn and beautiful, and she loved so deeply and truly. Just an all-around, wonderful, intelligent girl. The summer after she graduated, I went through some serious personal crap, and I ended up walking away from church and religion. Because of this, we grew apart. I still saw her, and we were still friends, but the lack of proximity coupled with the loss of what had first bonded us strained things. About a year went by and I was seeing her less and less. I missed her and our friendship. I reached out, she came over to my dorm, and we spent some time together. We made plans to see Les Mis in theaters the next week. She never got to go. She had been having back pain the doctors couldn't figure out, and that week she started having seizures and throwing up too. Because of these issues, she moved back in with her parents. She ended up diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I was never able to afford the trip to be with her when she was sick. I still feel so guilty for not just figuring it out. October will be 4 years since she passed, and I still miss her so much. I'm big on remembering people accurately and not pretending they were perfect just because they're gone. She wasn't perfect by any means, but she was closer than anyone else I've ever known. It was so unfair for someone like her to not only die young, but to suffer as horribly as she did. It wasn't fair that I wasn't there for her when she needed me most. The world is truly dimmer without her light. Too long didn't read. My best friend from college was taken by cancer at 23. She was a fantastic individual. No one deserves to die like that, but she absolutely didn't. Cancer is such an awful thing for people to deal with, and takes far too many people before their time. I'm sorry for your loss. Story 25. My psycho mom called the police on my brother and said he was hitting her. My brother was only refusing to give her money to support her gambling addiction and grabbed her wrist when he saw her grab a knife to keep her from slashing at him. My brother would never hit a woman. Neither one of us talk to her anymore. She's blown up our phones with guilt trips and lies and saying it's our fault her life sucks and telling us she owns us as our mother. I left for the Navy when I got kicked out of the house at 17 to get away from home. My brother had to continue dealing with her for several years because he couldn't join the military due to medical issues. Our grandma, her mom, passed away and our uncle is in the hospital. But we don't talk to that side of the family now because most of them have been ignorant to the toxicity and grip that our mother has had on us. Which sucks because they are really good people. Story 26. Teachers/managers punishing everyone for one person's mistakes. Story 27. When I was 15, we had our Year 10 formal, which is kind of like Australia's homecoming down/prom, I guess. I wasn't very excited for it, but I was excited for the after party, which was going to be my first high school party. I live 3 Ks from my school and had to take a bus into town every day, and both my parents worked a lot, so I missed a lot of parties. I talked about going to the after party for weeks, but my mom decided to tell me that I couldn't go on the way to the formal because I hadn't organized anything when she knew full well that I had. I was staying at my friend's house that night and she had the address on the invitation. Also, she told me that on the way, so I'd have no chance of organizing anything anyway. Mad me off as I had to spend the whole night at something I didn't care about and listen to everyone talk about a party I couldn't go. This experience taught me to always live up to the promises I make with my kids when I have them. Crappy parents are such an unfair thing in this world because no kid deserves parents who pull crap like that. Story 28. My brother and his friends prank called the police, and my parents' reaction was to have me and my friends fix the washing machine. Story 29. I'm an American that immigrated to Canada. Part of the process for getting permanent residency involves taking a test called CELPIP to prove you are fluent in English. This test is unbelievably hard, and I didn't do as well as I should have on it. I can't imagine how the Chinese and Indian people in the same room as me must have felt while taking it. Here's an example of something that is similar to a CELPIP question. We decided to travel to the large blue building. What best describes the building? A. Large. B. Blue. That's not an actual question, but it should give you an idea. Story 30. Zero tolerance policies for fighting. I can get jumped, do nothing, and still get suspended? Okay, way to victim shame. Story 31. My friend and coworker had been trying to get her degree. The first college closed, so she was going to another one, and it closed. She is $70,000 in debt and still has another year to get her associate's degree. She will never pay that off, ever. She does have a lawyer fighting for her right now. Story 32. My sister, Mish92, ate all of the marshmallows from the Lucky Charms when we were kids. My dad yelled at me for it. I'm just gonna hang on to this story for a minute because I need this respite of silliness in this sea of unfair awfulness. I am sorry about you getting yelled at and for you probably having to eat marshmallow-less Lucky Charms. I wish I could just keep commenting on this story, but I guess I should get back to the depressing stuff. Thanks for the smiles. Story 33. When I worked at Borders, I got fired because the person that was covering for me while I was on vacation got fired. On top of that, they really didn't even notify me. I got a text message from his girlfriend that still worked there, and she told me that I should call them. Well, hey, if you're mad at Borders, I've got some good news for you. Story 34. Every Christmas, I would bring donated animal food to the local shelter. On one occasion, I was waiting at the front desk when a man stormed in. He had the most beautiful dog on a leash and was screaming at the receptionist, "My son adopted this dog and he didn't consult us first. We don't want it. I'm here to give it back. Just take it." The son was nowhere to be seen. The dog had no idea what was going on, and he had only been adopted a week prior from waiting in the shelter for over 4 months. I stood there speechless. Story 35. Random Krites. The hell is a Krite? Whatever, I'm leaving this in. Sorry, viewers, I'm wasting your time with this typo. How unfair of me. Story 36. Me admitting a 51-year-old woman in palliative care knowing she has just a few days left before dying of cancer while her son, 22 years old like me, watched my supervisor explaining to her what was going to happen. He had lost his father to cancer a year and a half ago, and the same month he learned his mother had stage 4 cancer. Why did he have to suffer through this while I still have my 2 parents and all my grandparents? Cancer is a bee of a disease and can be so unfair. Story 37. 14th birthday. My grandparents got me my first iPod/first MP3 player. My older brother threw a crap fit because he didn't get anything too, of course, because it wasn't his birthday. He threw a fit in Best Buy until they bought him a Nintendo DS, so he got a present too for no reason. The next weekend he comes home from being with my grandparents again with an iPod of his own. So he got 2 presents because he threw a tantrum and guilted them into it. He was 17 at the time. I brushed it off and just laughed at him to myself for being such a child. He's a piece of crap and is only slightly more mature at 30 years than he was back then. Story 38. Not seen, but heard. I once interviewed a guy in high school for some boring crap. Went to his house and everything. Old guy, but in my opinion, he would beat out that Dos Equis guy for most interesting man. The interview took 5 minutes, but then he spent hours telling me other stories. The sad one was about what happened to food that gets donated to charity. He was a mercenary for many years. He witnessed with his own eyes a ship full of grains and canned goods docking in some African country I forget. The struggling civilians were kept behind a barbed fence while armed men came in and loaded up everything onto their trucks. After they left, the fence gate was open and the starving people were allowed to pick through the split grains, individual left-behind cans of goods, and rats, both dead and alive. When you donate anything to the poor in third world countries, all you're doing is fueling the systems that keep the people in poverty. Wow, didn't think there was much left in this thread that could depress me, but here we are. The world is unfair, folks. Do what you can to change that. Story 39. Any child with cancer. Story 40. Apparently anytime I tell a teenager they are too wasted to get into the bar. Story 41. Someone fired over giving a $1 coupon to someone whose $1 coupon wasn't working. Story 42. My younger cousin got diagnosed with cancer, leukemia, when he was 5. This happened a long time ago, and the success rate for survival was not as high as it is now. We weren't sure if he was going to make it at one point. Luckily, he did end up beating it, but the chemo destroyed all of his physical development. He basically never hit puberty and is something like 4.5 feet tall. He became self-destructive during his teenage years because he knew he could never play sports, have success with girls, or even simply just look as mature as his friends and classmates. All of those memes/jokes I see on the internet about guys having to be 6 feet tall make me laugh, but then I always think, what if he sees this and it brings back those self-destructive thoughts? He turns 21 this year, and I'm sure his idea is going to be taken by some bouncer because he looks like he's 10 years old. I really hope he's doing okay right now. He's a tough guy, but he doesn't ever show when he's hurting, and I know he is. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.